awake in your likeness. There are three statements that David made there. All of them are great statements. They have great lessons to teach. For instance, he says, number one, I will see your face in righteousness. Number two, I shall be satisfied. And number three, when I awake in your likeness. I want us tonight just to center in on that middle one there, I shall be satisfied. And that's because I think so many times one of the things we want most in life is to be satisfied with things. And yet, it seems like we never find that complete, total satisfaction in life. And men have tried all ways to try to find it. Certainly it's not to be found in sin, we know that. Because the Hebrew writer tells us in Hebrews chapter 11 in regard to Moses, that Moses chose rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. He understood there's not going to be lasting satisfaction in that. But there are a lot of things that are not sinful that a lot of people pursue after, trying to find happiness and trying to find satisfaction in their life, but all without success. It's not to be found in the wealth that a person might have in this life. When you think about that, Jay Gould was one of the wealthiest men in America at the time that he lived, back in the 1800s. A man of great, tremendous amount of wealth. And yet, he never was really satisfied by that. And most people are never satisfied by wealth. There's an Arab saying that says that pursuing wealth is like drinking salt water. You're never going to be satisfied. You're always going to be left wanting more and more. And that's the way it was with him. On his deathbed, he made this statement. He said, I suppose I am the most miserable man on earth. Several years back, when Howard Hughes was alive, he gave an interview by telephone with people, and they had a lot of questions to ask because someone had come out with a biography about him, and Howard Hughes was denying that he had nothing to do with that. And so they were questioning him about that. But toward the end, there was one question that one of those reporters asked of him. It was a simple question. He said, are you happy in life? And here's a man who was a multi-billionaire, and he had a simple answer for it. No. In spite of all the wealth that he had, he didn't find satisfaction in that wealth. Certainly did not find happiness in it. It's not to be found in pleasures in this life. Lord Byron, tremendous poet, well known, was a man who fed his sexual appetite, enjoyed all the pleasures that had to offer to him, and yet found no lasting satisfaction in it. Toward the end of his life, he said, the worm, the canker, and the grief are mine alone. No satisfaction found in that. It doesn't come in fame. It doesn't matter whether we talk about someone who is an athlete, becomes very famous in life, or someone is an actor, an actress, whatever. There's not real satisfaction found in that, not of a permanent basis. Clarence Darrow was considered by many people to be the greatest criminal lawyer ever in America. And yet a man, in spite of all the fame that he had from that, found no satisfaction to it. Here's a statement that he made when speaking at a graduation ceremony. He said, if I were a young man, I would chuck it all. I would commit suicide. I would get out of this life. It isn't worth what it cost. I wouldn't want any child of mine or anybody else to hear a lesson like that at the time of graduation. But it shows that this man, in spite of all the fame that he had, was a man that was not satisfied in this life. In fact, the truth of the matter is that only He who's created us, who knows us perfectly, is able to provide for us the satisfaction in life that we desire and look for. In fact, that's what David is talking about. David assures us that God will do that. For David said, I will be satisfied when I awake in your likeness. I think he's talking about the time of the resurrection. When we awake from death is the time that we're going to have fully and finally that total satisfaction. In 1 John chapter 3, 1 and 2, John said, Behold, what manner of love the Father hath for us, that we should be called the sons of God. Therefore the world knoweth us not, because it knew Him not. Beloved, now are we the sons of God, and it doth not yet appear what we shall be, but we know that when He shall appear, we shall be like Him. When Christ comes back, we're going to find ourselves to be like Him. And according to what David said, that's when we're going to be satisfied. So that satisfaction comes for the individual who has become a child of God and who lives his life in faithfulness to God, so that the time of the resurrection, or the time when Christ comes back, he is the individual that David says is going to be satisfied. Tonight, if you're here as an individual, you've never become God's child, there's no way you're going to find any lasting satisfaction in this life. When one believes in Jesus Christ as the Son of God, is willing to repent of his sins, confess Him before men, he can be buried with Him in baptism and have all of his past sins forgiven. He's added to God's church, to God's body. And there's a satisfaction that comes from that, knowing you've become God's child. But you have to live faithful to God to have that full satisfaction for all eternity. And so tonight, if you're here as an individual who's never become God's child, or as one who is a child of God, but you know you're not living faithful to Him, tonight God's given you an opportunity to correct all of that, either in becoming His child or as His child repenting of those sins you've done and praying to God for the forgiveness you need. And then living that life faithfully to God unto death, so that when the time comes of your resurrection, the time that Christ returns, you can have that full, total satisfaction for all eternity. If you're subject to His invitation then, as we stand and sing this song, we're doing that to encourage you to respond in obedience to God's will. Please do that now while we stand and sing.